So last week I was talking about the bringing of tanks to Ukraine and how that's going to escalate the war there. And this I wanted to take an opportunity to talk about a concept in war that we really haven't addressed on the show before, but um, is a concept that it's worth knowing about in terms of how wars are fought and how wars are mobilized. And it's helpful to just kind of contextualize where this is taking place. So what I'm talking about is called total war. And so total war is where a country completely reorganizes its economy and its ability to do basic functions for the sole purpose of fighting a war. And so we see the start of total war as a concept with the United States in the early 1940s. So after the US was bombed at Pearl Harbor, there was a massive transformation of the economy into a wartime economy. And, and this involved rationing certain goods, halting the production of certain consumer goods, and then making sure that, and making sure that all that effort was being put towards the war effort. So some examples of this were like, instead of using brass for, say, musical instruments, you would move that brass to an arms factory and make bullets. Or, a factory that was making clothes, consumer clothes, designer clothes, would be asked to participate in the war effort by by making military uniforms, right? And you can say the thing with food packaging, on and on it goes, right? And so the whole country, not just the government, right, but the regular individual citizens, and oftentimes this is achieved through rationing or through coupons that the government will hand out, ration coupons, to make sure that as much of the economy can possibly go towards the war front is actually going there. And so the reason I wanted to bring this up in terms of Ukraine is because one of the things that's kind of interesting about the war in Ukraine is that we've seen total war, but also not really. So it's kind of in a weird hybrid of what total war typically is. Now, what I think is actually very interesting is that although Ukraine has not fully shifted its economy towards kind of a war footing, the Russian economy has pretty much done that. And so, it's not as intense as it was like in the United States in the 40s, right? You don't see like whatever the Russian of Gap is, and I'm just picking on them as one company, right? But like, making military uniforms instead of making kind of their typical consumer clothing. But you do see that the mobilization is massive, and they've returned to the draft, and to the extent possible, they are moving as many resources as possible towards the war effort. And as wars evolve, this is kind of a new type of total war. Now, this is in contradistinction to, say, like, what you see with American imperialism, which is we have the military complex and we give them lots of money, but there's no real, like, if you blinked in the US, you would kind of forget about the fact that we're involved in 6 or 7 different countries and we have soldiers all over the world and 900 military bases and whatever, because all that's kind of kept out of view, right? Now, that part of that is because our wars are fought far away, but part of it is because, part of the war machine in the US is a racket. It always has been a racket. It makes lots of people very rich. Dwight Eisenhower warned about the potential for this war machine to get out of control, right? The military-industrial complex. But the military-industrial complex doesn't count as total war because it exists in a separate kind of plane of existence, as it were, than kind of regular Americans like myself. And so, we're seeing total war happen in Russia. Now, they're not feeling as much of the brunt of it because that war is happening quote unquote far away, which is to say it's happening primarily in Ukraine. But Ukraine is reacting on the back foot, right? The war is very much present for them. Now, there hasn't been a draft necessarily, but there has been a huge mobilization of individuals. And lots of people are volunteering. I remember in the early days of the war that they were talking about, not really having enough resources and supplies for all the people who wanted to sign up. And by the way, that would have been a good, timely, I guess, opportunity to shift the country to a war economy to the extent that that was possible. Now, again, we're not seeing total war happening. We're not seeing kind of a complete move to total war in the Russia-Ukraine war, but I wanted to bring this up this week because I actually think that the escalation of sending tanks to Ukraine is perhaps going to get the ball rolling to create some sort of total war that goes on there. And by the way, guys, I'm not just talking about this because I think it's an interesting topic and I want to educate people on it, but also I want to just put out an additional warning. Once you're in total war, it's really hard to transition back to kind of a peacetime footing, a peacetime economy. Now, obviously, it's extremely difficult if your country is the one that's physically being attacked. But at the same time, there has to be some level of what victory is. And then after that, there has to be an active movement to demilitarize the economy. And it's a very difficult thing to do because lots of people are getting rich off the war, not just this war, but all wars. And so I'm hopeful that when this war ends, and it will end, and I hope and pray that it happens soon, and that there are as few casualties as possible, and that to the extent possible that the sovereign integrity of these countries is not too violated, and on it goes, right? But I wonder and I hope that the leadership will exist on the respective sides to demilitarize their economies. Because if they don't, I'm nervous that we would actually see kind of a re-flare up in tensions in a couple of years. Now, mind you, right, this is the second major incursion that Russia has had in Ukraine in the past decade. So I almost wonder if that process of demilitarizing the economy is not going on in Russia. Now, they've taken so many casualties, they may not have a choice. But again, I hope that there is enough wisdom and leadership there to demilitarize these economies once this terrible war is over, because once you move to a total war footing, war becomes the momentum, right? There's an inertia for war. And, war is a terrible thing. To the extent that we can prevent it, even through, seemingly mundane things like shifting the economy, then I think that's an important step towards lasting peace.
Thank you so much for watching this video from Let Them Eat Bread. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out on Twitch and on Facebook, where announcements about our page are kept. We make videos every week, and you can find all of our videos at youtube.com/LetThemEatBread. Thanks again, and see you next time.